1 month ago, a young man named Radorel Zane, the second prince of the kingdom of Zane, practices swordsmanship outside while a woman sits on a bench nearby. She asks him what kind of adult he wants to be in the future. He questions why she suddenly brought up such a topic and wonders what kind of adult she means. The woman, Martina Marcel, daughter of the prime minister, reminds him that he will become an adult next month, so the question isn't so sudden. Radorel contemplates the future and expresses his desire to do something for his kingdom and support his brother. He admits he isn't very good at studying but suddenly decides on a goal. Martina teases him, expecting him to say he wants to be an adventurer, but he surprises her by declaring he will be a knight who protects the kingdom from its enemies, and will fulfill his royal duties as a prince. Martina praises his dream as wonderful and asks if he will also protect her as his wonderful knight. Radorel blushes but promises to sacrifice anything to protect the kingdom and her. He softly calls her Tina as he makes this vow. The scene shifts to Granit Zane, the first prince of the kingdom, who listens to Radorel's story with interest. Granit acknowledges the tale and expresses concern that his younger brother might be anxious about the upcoming succession ceremony. Radorel reacts with surprise and worry upon hearing this, realizing the significance of the rite of succession. The legendary holy sword Dainsleif, passed down since the first king, is said to grant kingship to whoever pulls it out, but no one has succeeded for centuries. It now symbolizes the coming-of-age ceremony for royals to prove their resolve. Radorel clenches his fist, declaring that once the ceremony ends, he will be recognized as a man. Granit Zane smiles, relieved that his fears were unfounded. Granit places a hand on Radorel's head, expressing his high hopes for the boy's future. Radorel confidently vows to become the mightiest knight and the most famous hero in history, promising to protect Granit and Tina. His determination intensifies as he grips the holy sword, declaring he will protect the kingdom. Shock ripples through the gathered nobles as Granit realizes Radorel has pulled the holy sword. He demands an explanation, stunned that the impossible has happened. Radorel himself is bewildered, questioning how he managed to draw the sword. The crowd murmurs in disbelief, calling the event ridiculous. Granit urgently demands how Radorel pulled out the sword. Grabbing him by the shoulder, Radorel stammers that he doesn't know. Granit's frustration boils over as he questions why he wasn't chosen despite his lifelong support for the kingdom. His eyes widen in denial, refusing to accept the impossible truth unfolding before him. Radorel urgently demands Granit to give him the holy sword. Grabbing it fiercely, Granit reacts with shock and confusion, unable to comprehend the sudden forceful demand. The sword clangs as Radorel pulls it away, and the nobles, calling out to Granit in alarm. He clutches his chest, overwhelmed by the situation unfolding before him. Granit wrestles with the realization that the holy sword chose Radorel instead of him, the rightful heir. He contemplates the implications, understanding that Radorel might be the true successor to the first king. His frustration boils over as he lashes out at the onlookers, demanding silence. A noble tries to calm him, reminding him of their public setting, but Granit struggles to regain composure. With a commanding gesture, Granit declares the succession ceremony concluded and forbids anyone from speaking of what they witnessed. He warns of severe punishment for disobedience, asserting his authority as acting king. Radorel pleads with him, but Granit orders him to return to his room and rest, promising to call for him later. Radorel questions why this is happening while the king lies ill, fearing a future succession war. Granit shouts fiercely for everyone to leave his presence immediately, his anger and authority filling the room. Tina and a noble silently watch as Radorel cowers in fear, shielding himself from the outburst. The tension hangs heavy as Granit's command echoes, forcing all to retreat from the scene. Radorel clenches his hand in frustration, questioning why he wasn't chosen and what he lacks. His anger erupts as he demands to know the meaning of this decision. A calm voice advises patience, explaining that Radorel is only being assigned to his own territory and should accept the journey ahead. Radorel protests, feeling treated like a criminal, but the stern officials insist it is necessary for the kingdom's governance. They assure him he is not to blame and that once Granit ascends the throne, stability will return and Radorel can come back to the royal capital. The Prime Minister Lockwood Marcel and General Bazel Garst stand firm, urging understanding of Granit's decision. Radorel angrily questions the shackles binding him, demanding an explanation. They reveal that the Holy Sword's blessing has increased his physical abilities, but its miasma-infused magic is consuming his surroundings. Since he cannot control this power, it must be suppressed with a demon seal. Radorel struggles to accept this, shocked by the implication that he could threaten the kingdom. He vehemently denies any intent to threaten his brother with the sword's power, swearing his loyalty to the kingdom and the oath he made as a knight. The officials urge him to call Granit, confident he will understand. The Prime Minister solemnly confirms the decision has been made, leaving Radorel isolated in his resolve and frustration. Radoral's face tightens with shock as he hears that everything was done at the behest of his brother, Lord Graned. He falls to his knees, denying the claim in disbelief, unable to accept that Graned would do such a thing. He struggles with the harsh truth, trembling and overwhelmed. A solemn woman stands before him, her expression unreadable as she places a hand over her chest. Radoral pleads with her, calling her Tina and insisting this situation is ridiculous. She responds quietly, reminding him she can only be called Tina by her betrothed and wishes him a safe journey. Radoral calls out desperately to Tina, but she remains composed, gently changing the subject to hear about his future adventures. His eyes fill with tears as he insists this isn't what he wants to discuss. Tina reveals her true identity as Martina Marcel, daughter of the Prime Minister, and warns that Graned may have used the Holy Sword before, but not anymore. Radoral listens, confused and distressed. As Martina explains that everything changed when Graned drew the Holy Sword, she stresses that for the kingdom's stability, feelings must be set aside, and if Graned remains in the royal capital, the kingdom will suffer. She questions whether this is truly what Graned would want. Radoral clenches his fists, refusing to accept it, his voice rising in defiance. The young knight clenches his sword with determination, recalling his vow to support his brother and protect the people from demons and enemies. He demands why, despite his sacrifices, the promises to protect him and the country are being broken. A cold smile crosses the woman's face as she praises his willingness to sacrifice for the kingdom, insisting his dream can now come true. A stern man stands behind her, stating he once adored the young knight, but only for the kingdom's good. The knight is left troubled, hearing how unfortunate the situation has become. The knight kneels, devastated. As the woman declares their engagement is over, he wrestles with the painful realization that while Tina was important to him, to her he was merely a means to an end, a goal to be achieved. The woman gently asks if he is sick, noting his terrible appearance. He shouts in anguish, questioning the point of it all now. His hands are bound as he struggles, refusing to accept the cruel reality. The woman's face darkens, her expression unreadable, as he desperately denies the truth. A woman and a stern man watch as the young knight rushes away, his hands bound. The woman wonders why he is in such a hurry, puzzled by his distress. The knight calls out desperately for Tina and his brother, anguish overwhelming him as he collapses, gripping his head and shouting why. The stern man bids the knight farewell, promising to pray for his health as the carriage departs. Inside, the knight sits silently, his expression heavy with sorrow and confusion as the carriage moves forward. The knight suddenly notices a group on the palace steps, including the woman and the stern man. Tina calls out to him tearfully, convinced there must have been a mistake, refusing to believe her brother would abandon her. The knight's conflicted gaze meets hers, caught between hope and despair. The knight's face hardens with determination, his eyes sharp and resolute. The woman's tearful plea echoes as he recalls happier times, a memory of laughter and warmth with his brother. The contrast between past joy and present turmoil deepens his resolve. Sweat beads form on the young prince's neck as his breathing grows heavy, his hands bound tightly in front of him. He slumps forward, exhausted and defeated, sliding down the cushioned seat of the carriage. The carriage speeds down a tree-lined road, the sound of distant screams piercing the air, echoing his inner turmoil and helplessness. 5 years later, a cloaked figure races through the forest on horseback, the wind whipping his cloak behind him. His eyes narrow with focus as he grips the reins tightly, determination etched on his face. Suddenly, two monstrous, three-eyed beasts leap from the shadows, snarling fiercely. The rider remains calm, preparing for the imminent attack as the beasts close in, their claws and teeth bared. The rider dismounts smoothly, shedding his cloak to reveal a confident young man with sharp eyes and a fur-lined coat. He addresses the intruders, accusing them of vandalizing his domain and drawing a dagger with a warning to prepare for what's coming. With a swift motion, he casts a sword-fighting spell, his eyes blazing with intensity. He unleashes a powerful attack named Poison Dragontail HGGR, striking at the beasts with deadly precision and magical force. Two monstrous, three-eyed beasts growl and prepare to attack, but the young man stands firm, unfazed. He taunts them for still trying to fight despite their injuries. His cursed sword's power is revealed as it burns through one beast's head, leaving a smoking ruin. The beasts try to flee, but he blocks their escape with his sword drawn, declaring he has them exactly where he wants. He warns them not to expect a safe return, accusing them of making a big show out of it. The scene shifts as the young man, now identified as Radoral Zane, is greeted by a rugged adventurer named Zafis Bartolomeo. Zafis casually asks if Radoral has finished his task, impressed that all the beasts were taken down by just one person. Rhaedoral modestly claims it was nothing special, testing his sword's effectiveness. Their conversation turns teasing as Zaphis calls Rhaedoral a crybaby, recalling the first time Rhaedoral came to him. Rhaedoral protests, but Zaphis explains he initially didn't know what to expect from the young prince and thought the real issue was the group's lack of tact. Rhaedoral listens quietly as others stand nearby, reflecting on the past. A man explains that it can't be helped since the royal capital gave no support to the town that finally started up, and sending a lord to oversee it naturally upset everyone. He tells the young man he was lucky to be a kid then, as he wasn't the type to give up and rot there. Recalling the past, the man admits surprise when the boy stormed into his room demanding a fighting lesson. He found the boy interesting and funny for a royal kid and worth training. The man jokes that he thought fighting was just a hobby since the boy kept beating him up, but it made him stronger, the town grew, and the boy became a respectable lord both in name and reality. The boy protests, calling the man gross, but the man insists the town will be fine without him now. The boy declares he will protect the town and everything because this is where his home is. He tells the man that if he wants to retire, he's welcome to, but when that happens, the boy will take his place. The man is taken aback, reflecting that the boy has grown up. The boy awkwardly says he has news for him. Suddenly, the boy is told he has a visitor from the royal capital, which surprises him. The man asks if he's all right and offers help if needed. The boy declines and says he'll go. The man then asks if the boy can accompany him for a bit after finishing his business. A man with a confident grin challenges the young lord to a fight like old times, insisting it wouldn't be a challenge if it weren't him. The young lord, surprised and wary, wonders if the visitors are Bazel or Lockwood. A maid informs him the visitors wait in the reception room. He opens the door and asks what they want. Inside, a woman with long hair and a calm smile greets the young lord, calling him Prince Rhaedoral and noting it's been a long time. The young lord, confused, questions when he became a prince. The woman is revealed as Martina Marcel, and the young lord reacts with shock at her name. Martina solemnly informs him that his father, the king, has passed away. The young lord processes the news quietly. She then reveals that the king has sent a royal decree. The decree demands that Rhaedoral Zane, the king's brother, immediately resign as lord of the pioneer town and return to the royal capital. Martina warns him the kingdom faces a great crisis. The Eastern Arslanian Empire, the continent's top power, has declared war on Zane. She reminds him of the gravity of his actions and the kingdom's peril. The visitor questions if the declaration of war is merely a show of strength, noting the empire's power but also its many enemies. He explains the kingdom faces a threat from the Eastern Arslanian Empire, which holds 3 of the 12 legendary holy swords, each with a confirmed wielder known as a holy sword holder. It's rare to have 4 wielders of the holy sword at once, including the young lord himself. The visitor solemnly gives the royal decree demanding the young lord return to the capital and fight the empire, urging him to understand the gravity of this threat as a wielder of the holy sword. The young lord explodes in anger, slamming his fist down and shouting that this is a mockery. The knights flinch at his outburst while the woman remains calm. He demands Martina answer with her heart, accusing her of wanting him to fight and risk his life despite having driven him out of the royal capital. Martina quietly affirms her loyalty to him as the royal prince. The young lord grips his sword tightly, demanding an explanation while the woman urges him to calm down, insisting her words are for his own good. He warns he can still contain himself but demands clarity. She remains composed, ready to explain the situation. The woman reveals that the king promises to grant any wish if the young lord stands on the battlefield as the holy sword's holder, allowing him to gain new territories beyond this remote region and reclaim his royal status. The young lord scoffs at the idea of reclaiming his status and lashes out, calling her arrogant for insulting the people's lands. He orders her to leave if that's all she has to say. When accused of disobeying a royal decree, he coldly retorts that he cannot simply comply. As the tension escalates, he snaps his fingers, signaling he has no choice but to act. Bound tightly in chains, the young lord's eyes blaze with fury as he shouts that this was her plan all along. A shocked maid calls out to him. While 2 armored soldiers restrain him, the woman named Martina smiles coldly, her name echoing in his mind. She admits she never wanted this, but as the daughter of the prime minister, Lockwood Marcel, she must sacrifice everything for the kingdom. She insists it's all for the future of Zane and demands he accompany them. The young lord, kneeling and chained, bitterly acknowledges her words, accusing her of treating him like a criminal and fearing the use of slavery magic. He angrily questions how low she will stoop. The woman pleads with him as a former vassal and ex-fiancé, begging him to obey quietly. He recalls his past weakness and foolishness, once believing proper behavior would save him. Now, he screams that he will never submit again, shouting her name, Nymelia, as he clenches his fists in defiance. Suddenly, Chaos erupts as the soldiers stumble, and Mertina shouts to alert others. A confident woman in a maid outfit appears, her presence commanding as she raises a hand to halt the advancing chains. The young lord's eyes widen in shock, caught between fear and hope. A woman in a maid outfit urgently asks if her master is all right, to which he replies with a tired thanks. His eyes widen in shock as he recognizes her magic and golden eyes, realizing she was buried 200 years ago. He questions how she could be here, stunned to see that the maid is one of the legendary 6 witches of doom. The maid declares that only she can do whatever she wants with her master. Teasing him about her boldness, the master winces as she pokes him, complaining that the handcuffs restraining him are too weak and not fit for play, demanding more serious bondage. He tells her to keep quiet, while a concerned woman named Mertina watches on nervously. The master warns that now that the restraints have failed, something else is coming. The master questions a woman about who ordered his capture and transfer to the royal capital. Suspecting his older brother granted, she admits surprised that he has a legendary witch on his side but denies any involvement from the king or her father. She takes responsibility for being too hasty. Apologizing to the master, he resolves to leave the matter at that. The woman prays silently as the master grips his sword tightly, preparing for what's next. With a fierce expression, he raises his sword high, ready to strike down whatever threat approaches. The man asks the woman why she stopped the sword, addressing her as Your Highness. He acknowledges it would have been easy to kill Mertina after what happened, but he hesitates. He tells her he has a question and won't kill her yet. The woman responds that it's useless, claiming there's nothing she can reveal. He notes her resolute expression and willingness to sacrifice herself, calling it lovely, then commands, Nymelia, your turn. The woman, now naked and restrained by magical rings, struggles as a sinister voice taunts her. It says enduring pain is one thing, but what about pleasure? It threatens to melt down her pride and feelings. She wonders what's happening, feeling a strange tingling. But the man insists she won't crack under torture. The man gently cups her face, proposing to try and see how far she can endure. Tears stream down her flushed face as he challenges her endurance. 2 armored soldiers nervously question what the maid did. The young man, Raydorl Zane, tightly embraces a distressed Mertina Marcel, demanding to know what she did to the prime minister's daughter. He accuses her of unleashing a curse on him, a royal, and trying to forcibly restrain him. He declares her guilty of high treason and orders her placed in custody. Raydorl's expression darkens as he recalls that day, explaining he was devastated by betrayal. He says everything he believed in was taken and he was cast out. A smiling family scene contrasts with his bitter words. A woman in a maid outfit mocks him, while a man angrily accuses Raydorl of trying to rob him of the small normal life he finally has. Raydorl's resolve hardens as he vows to show no mercy, insisting he is no longer the same person he was. He warns that if his pride is trampled on, he will respond fiercely. He commands to tell his brother that he will finish the war against the Arslanian Empire by himself. The armored soldiers remark on the swift reply, only 3 days since their last response. Noting the eagerness, a vast army, estimated at about 1,000 soldiers, stands ready. A figure exhales sharply, tension rising as they prepare for what's to come. The commander of the royal army, Darren Galust, steps forward with authority, demanding the gates be opened. Behind him, his soldiers stand firm. A confident man gestures to a guard, signaling the order to proceed. The gates creak open amid a rumbling sound. The group, including a maid and 2 men, observe the scene with surprise. The maid questions if this is normal for welcoming royalty. Noting the commander looks like a young brat despite his title, she admits surprise that the commander came personally. Sensing the urgency and lack of pretense, the man holding her chains states their country is cornered. The gravity of the situation sinking in. The maid, visibly distressed and blushing, addresses Royal Highness Raydorl. He calls her Meltina, his tone serious. She struggles against her chains, shocked and defensive, denying she gave permission to speak out. She gasps as she realizes the only hope to resist the Empire's invasion is to rely on His Highness, the weight of their predicament clear. He sharply orders her to stop moving, scolding her for not even managing to stay still. She gasps, trembling under his grip. Despite her struggle, she feels an overwhelming, intense pleasure coursing through her body. Nymelia's curse triggered simply by their exchange of words, she stammers, addressing him as Your Highness, while he insists his actions are for the sake of the kingdom. His hand moves to touch her again, and she pants heavily, overwhelmed, though always a chaste woman. Her mind's balance between reason and pleasure tilts easily toward him. She cries out in a mix of pain and pleasure. Yet no one had ordered her to go this far. Nearby, a maid and 2 men notice the scene, one stating, He's here. The focus shifts to a stern young man in armor, gripping a horse's reins. He reflects on his distrust of those working under his brother, especially this man, the son of General Galust. His gaze is sharp, filled with suspicion and resolve. The young man steps forward, declaring he will show no mercy if met with hostility. He introduces himself as Dronzer Recap, thanking them for coming this far. He addresses the other man with respect, acknowledging the long time since they last met, setting a tense tone for their encounter. A sharp gaze fixes on Dronzer Galust as a man in dark attire commands him to raise his head. Identifying himself as the son of General Galust, Dronzer is reminded of a past greeting with this man and his father at the royal palace. The man notes Dronzer seems obedient this time, while a maid and a soldier nearby comment on his unusual nature, calling him a new type and cute. The man turns away, suggesting they skip formalities. He reveals he carries a message from his subordinates. His Highness Dronzer will join the upcoming war. He humbly asks Dronzer to save the kingdom and declares he has come to pick him up. Dronzer is reassured not to worry, as the man vows to keep promises and honor the loyalty of the subjects. Citing his late father's teachings, he pledges to protect the kingdom with all his power. Dronzer, impressed and sweating, acknowledges the man's admirable determination and urges preparations to begin immediately. Dronzer's expression shifts to concern as he addresses Meltina, who looks anxious and blushes while clutching her hands. He questions if there is a problem, but she denies it. The man reflects on Meltina's past abusive behavior toward Dronzer, calling the current treatment merciful punishment. The scene ends with Dronzer chained, looking up at Meltina, deep in thought. The man warns Dronzer not to make a certain face, assuring him that Meltina still has a use and won't be treated badly. As per his highness's wishes, Meltina, chained and sweating, looks down in distress while a maid nearby suggests there's a misunderstanding. Dronzer, sweating nervously, asks if Meltina is coming along, as the man admits he has talked too much and urges them to head to the royal capital immediately. Meltina looks shocked and anxious as the man declares he will leave her behind, saying she won't be of any use even if taken along. Outside, a serious man apologizes and says he will leave the town, entrusting Meltina to the man in charge. The man confidently accepts responsibility for Meltina, who looks downcast but resigned. The carriage is prepared to depart, escorted by a horseman. Inside, Dronzer questions the man about not bringing anyone else, who replies that managing the city is also a concern. The maid introduces herself as Nymelia, caretaker of her master, and expresses eagerness to work with Dronzer. Dronzer politely offers to fulfill any requests from His Royal Highness Dronzer, who sits confidently, acknowledging his noble royal blood. Dronzer smiles slightly, teasing Dronzer about being treated like royalty. A tense silence falls as a man, seated with his arms crossed, fixates on a word that unsettles him deeply. His eyes narrow sharply, challenging, asking if the same conviction would hold true if he were to fight his brother. His expression tightens with a mix of doubt and resolve. The man swallows nervously, pleading that even if it's a joke, not everyone can simply ignore such words. He admits to grumbling despite being discarded as an unnecessary prince, feeling the weight of his exile. Another figure, calm and composed, teases him lightly, yet the man's unease grows as he contemplates the implications. The calm figure reveals that His Majesty Granted sincerely wishes to reconcile with the troubled prince, hoping they will unite to stand against the empire. He urges the prince to consider the king's feelings. While a cheerful maid named Nymelia eagerly responds to the call for action, the prince reflects quietly on the king's emotions, a flicker of determination crossing his face. Nymelia pours a warm drink with a bright smile, offering it to the prince. He reacts with surprise and a hint of embarrassment, while the maid playfully insists on the milk. Suddenly, the prince realizes and exclaims in shock that the lady was a magician, catching Nymelia off guard as she looks on with curiosity. Shocked, he exclaims at the magic performed without chanting. The calm figure explains it's no surprise, especially with a powerful magician accompanying them. The man realizes the display of power is a warning. Don't do anything stupid, meant to keep them in check. The maid gently chides him for overthinking, while he nervously sips the tea she prepared. She praises the tea's taste, revealing she added special honey. His shock turns to outrage as he demands to know what she put in it. The scene shifts to a carriage traveling toward the royal capital. He reflects on the upcoming reunion after 5 years, bracing for a wild homecoming as the carriage approaches the city. The carriage approaches the royal capital, its towering walls casting a formidable shadow. A maid admires the impressive fortifications, imagining a grand and dignified king ruling within, while the man beside her questions if the city is truly that great. The carriage moves through a bustling town, stirring faded memories in the man as he observes the lively streets. He senses the war's toll on the people and wonders if they feel the same heavy atmosphere. A servant calls out to him respectfully. Inside the carriage, a knight informs the man that his audience with the king will be tomorrow, and that a mansion has been prepared for his rest. The man questions why not the royal palace, realizing his brother's resentment toward him. The knight insists this is not the case, but the man knows he has lost much trust. The man, arms crossed, tells the knight not to cover up the truth. He has known for 5 years that his brother resents him over the holy sword. The knight remains silent as the carriage comes to a stop. The man announces their arrival, the tension between them palpable. A grand mansion stands tall under a cloudy sky. Before it, a young man with sharp eyes and a fur-trimmed coat surveys the scene, while a cheerful maid beside him beams with excitement. A knight gestures toward the mansion, inviting the young man to use it during his stay in the capital. The young man silently acknowledges, thinking he clearly sees through his brother's intentions. He reflects bitterly that his brother resents him and excludes him from the palace, yet still dangles rewards to exploit his strength. The young man questions if he is free to do as he pleases in the mansion. Receiving confirmation, he decides to accept the offer and thanks the knight, who promises to escort him again tomorrow. The maid happily prepares to accompany him. The young man is addressed respectfully as Your Highness while walking outside. The maid points out how this mansion differs greatly from their previous home in the frontier city. He admits he dislikes the motives behind it but acknowledges the mansion itself is blameless. They step inside, resolving to make themselves comfortable. A line of maids bow deeply in a grand mansion's entrance hall, greeting the young man with a unified welcome as the younger brother of the king. He stands there, sweat beading on his face, while a surprised maid covers her mouth in shock. A formally dressed man approaches with a respectful bow, recognizing the young man and recalling a past encounter where he gave sweets at a tea party. The man introduces himself as Sarawin, formerly serving the king. Sarawin expresses honor at meeting the young man again and relays that the king has instructed them to attend to his highness and to ask for anything needed. Sarawin then announces he has something important to discuss with everyone present. The young man abruptly dismisses Sarawin with a cold declaration that he is fired and must leave immediately, causing shock and disbelief among Sarawin and the maids behind him. The man panics, asking if they did something wrong and why such a thing would be said. The young man coldly replies that he wants him gone because he is unnecessary, comparing him to something thrown away when no longer needed. Shock and disbelief freeze the man. The young man reassures the maid that she need not worry about the mansion's size or managing it alone. He insists the only person he trusts to handle it is her, excluding even his brother's agents. The maid looks surprised but touched by his trust. The man clenches his fist in frustration and vows to report this matter to His Majesty granted himself. The young man dismissively tells him to do as he pleases, showing no concern for the threat. The young man and the maid stand quietly in the mansion's grand hall, the maid blushing as she recalls his words of trust. He questions her expression, and she playfully insists she won't let anyone interrupt their time together, teasing him to see a doctor for his odd statement. Nymelia boldly declares her readiness to receive her master's passion and desire, urging him not to hide his embarrassment. The master silences her abruptly, demanding if she's satisfied now. She winces, complaining that his grip hurts, but he orders her to check the mansion. Reluctantly, she agrees, rubbing her arm. She steps forward, surrounded by dark, smoky figures that seem to dissipate as she moves. She commands the search of the mansion for any dangers or hidden people. Calm and composed, she acknowledges the order with a simple understood, mistress. Inside the mansion, Nymelia assures her master to rest easy and leave everything to her. She offers to be called any time if he cannot sleep, showing a softer, caring side. The master smiles, counting on her, but then notices her playful expression and accuses her of ignoring his feelings. The next day, the master approaches a throne room where a man sits on the throne. He announces he has a report for His Majesty King granted, walking confidently toward the king to deliver his message. A man approaches a throne where the king sits, flanked by an attendant. He announces that he has brought Prince Radorl, the king's younger brother, presenting the prince with a serious expression. A heavy silence fills the throne room as the first prince stands before the king, tension thick between them. Their gazes lock, each measuring the other with quiet intensity. The prince kneels, announcing himself as Radorl Zane, sent by the king's command. The king orders him to raise his head, signaling a shift in their formal stance. The king welcomes Radorl warmly, urging him to drop formalities and speak as brothers once again. Radorl responds with a smile, accepting the invitation to reconnect on familiar terms. Radorl apologizes for missing their father's funeral, asking forgiveness for his absence. The king acknowledges his brother's duty in guarding the frontier, praising his efforts. Yet, a sharp voice accuses Radorl of shamelessly pretending to be king, and of Chancellor Lockwood's cold composure despite his daughter Martina's captivity. highlighting the strained political and familial tensions beneath the surface. The prince notes that General Garst is absent, while the two men who exiled him stand before him, mirroring the past. He recalls the small-minded king's jealous eyes, trapped by the holy sword, the same as when he was abandoned. He confronts the lingering resentment, realizing he still hasn't been forgiven despite being used again. He questions the reason for his summons to the royal capital, admitting he feels the same conflicted way. The other man acknowledges the prince has likely heard the news. The Eastern Arsline Empire has invaded their kingdom. Due to the holy sword wielder's appearance, 1/3 of the kingdom has already fallen, and General Garst is barely holding back the enemy, with defeat imminent. The prince asks what his brother wants him to do now. The older man replies that this is their last chance, and all he needs is a single word of apology. The younger prince reflects on their bond, feeling the weight of this final turning point. The brother commands the holy sword wielder, Recap Zane, to take up the holy sword Dainsleif and fight against the empire to save their kingdom. The prince's expression hardens as the call to action echoes. The younger brother's clenched fist trembles as he bitterly accepts that to his older sibling. He is no longer a brother but merely a pawn. His jaw tightens with resolve, declaring he will reclaim what was stolen and crush those responsible. His voice hardens with determination, asserting that he alone will seize control. He firmly refuses the call to arms, apologizing but stating he cannot fight against the empire. The shock on the older man's face is palpable, his eyes wide with disbelief. The room erupts in outrage as officials condemn the younger prince's defiance, calling it insolent to defy the royal decree. The younger brother stands firm, questioning if they truly understand the weight of their words. His sharp gaze emphasizes the gravity of the royal decree they are challenging. The tension escalates as a chancellor angrily rebukes the prince, calling his stance disrespectful to the king. The prince calmly counters, explaining his duty to protect the pioneer city from monster invasions and questioning the reasonableness of abandoning that for war. The chancellor insists on the importance of national priorities, but the prince's calm demeanor and pointed words hint at a deeper conflict over what truly matters. The prince questions the gathered nobles about reinforcements beyond himself, asking if any other lords have come to aid. He points out that only the army and the knight order face the empire, expressing disbelief that many nobles are present but contributing little military power. His sharp words accuse them of expecting him to fight alone while they watch safely from a distance, causing the nobles to sweat nervously. An older man demands what the prince wants, warning that if he refuses to participate in the battle, there is no reason for him to be there. The prince counters with a sly smile, offering to hear any demands, whether money, status, or something else, inviting them to speak openly. The prince praises the man's directness and skill at reading hearts, dismissing trivial flattery and insisting he state his demands plainly, holding up a scroll. He reveals that his request comes from an unfortunate brother exiled from their homeland, and asks to hear the conditions tied to that plea. Recap's scheme begins to take shape as he turns with a confident smile, asking if they want to hear about his conditions. The older man listens intently, tension thick in the air. The older man nervously asks Recap to state his exact conditions. Recap unfurls a scroll and declares that if they agree to his terms, he will fight to protect the kingdom of Zane from the Arsline Empire. Recap lays out his demands. First, King Graned must guarantee his safety within the kingdom. Second, the royal palace must grant 100,000 gold coins to the pioneer city under Recap's rule, shocking the nobles. The conditions continue. All property Recap acquires in the war will remain his, and the royal palace cannot demand its return. He also claims the right to decide the fate of prisoners of war captured by him. The nobles are stunned, questioning what Recap is thinking. He warns that if they want compensation, they must state it clearly, revealing this as his final condition. Recap delivers his final condition with fierce intensity. King Graned must appoint him, the younger brother, as crown prince and make him the next king. Shock ripples through the room as two men react with alarm and disbelief. An older man angrily calls Recap foolish and demands if he even understands what he's saying. Recap stands confidently, unfazed, as the man accuses him of disrespecting the king and essentially declaring intent to kill the monarch and seize the throne. The older man nervously addresses King Graned, questioning his seriousness. The king, calm and assured, asks if he doubts his resolve. Recap smirks, clearly confident in the unfolding plan. King Graned shouts fiercely that the crown prince will be his son, Strauss, not Recap. He challenges how anyone could accept Recap as crown prince, while Recap smiles with a dark, knowing expression. The prince casually drops his final demand, saying he will remove the last condition. Shock and confusion ripple through the room as his brother and an advisor struggle to process this unexpected concession. The prince confirms he said he would drop the last condition, addressing his brother directly. The prince presses on, urging the other to sign the oath immediately. While the brother hesitantly agrees, the prince accuses him of deliberately presenting absurd conditions to force other demands to be accepted. The gathered men worry that if the king's request is rejected, his qualifications will be questioned, and the kingdom's fragile unity risks collapse with some defecting to the empire. The prince contemplates the level of preparation, wondering about the other 4 conditions he is scheming with. He then agrees to bring the seal right away and insists on sealing the deal properly with a blood seal, emphasizing their bond as brothers. The brother reacts with surprise and confusion at the mention of a blood seal. The prince insists they must stand united against the imperial invasion, proposing a blood contract to bind their faith together. The brother, uneasy but resigned, tells him to do as he pleases. Both men prepare themselves mentally as the scene closes on their tense alliance, with the prince confidently biting his finger to begin the blood seal. The king asks if his brother is satisfied with their pact, promising they will fight the empire together and he won't allow defeat. The brother replies affirmatively. The prince reveals the contract is established, showing a blood-stained seal. He commands it to activate, flames erupting from the seal. Dark tendrils suddenly burst forth, shocking the king and prince alike. The king reacts with alarm as the shadowy limbs reach toward them. While the prince remains calm and composed, the king struggles against the encroaching darkness, bewildered by the sudden turn. The king collapses, gasping for breath as his aides call out to him. The prince stands firm, declaring the contract is sealed and warning his brother to be prepared. The king clutches his chest in pain, questioning the hidden purpose behind the contract as dark energy swirls around them. The prince's calm demeanor contrasts with the king's distress, emphasizing the deep and binding nature of their blood pact. The wounded king gasps in pain, clutching his chest as smoke rises around him. A man urgently calls out to him. Alarmed, the prince, standing tall and composed, commands the royal guard to seize the intruder. The tense atmosphere thickens as the title Chronicles of the Holy Sword appears. The prince turns sharply and orders the guards to prepare themselves. The armored soldiers nod nervously, bracing for action. Suddenly, the prince strikes with overwhelming force, shattering one guard's helmet and sending him reeling. The prince's powerful blow sends multiple guards crashing to the ground, their armor clattering loudly. He stands resolute, his expression cold and unyielding as the defeated soldiers lie scattered behind him. The injured king, supported by a man, struggles to stand, his face twisted in pain and disbelief. The prince sneers, declaring the kingdom's ruin is unsurprising given the royal guard's weakness. The king, trembling, demands to know what was done to him, while the prince's calm gaze hints at a deeper, darker truth behind the attack. The prince announces he has finalized their contract and challenges them to try if they dare, warning they must be ready to lose their king. The soldiers shout orders to restrain the prince immediately, with one commanding to attack at once. Despite their protests, the prince calmly states this is condition 1 of the contract. The prince declares that King Granted will guarantee Raidel's safety within the kingdom of Sane. The shocked man recalls an oath from before and cannot believe it. The prince warns firmly that the contract is sealed and reminds them they know the consequences of disobedience. The man accuses the prince of placing a contractor's curse on him, demanding an explanation. The prince confirms this is true for both of them, maintaining a calm demeanor as the man reacts with disbelief and anger. The man angrily questions the prince, accusing him of using sorcery to force criminals into submission, especially against his own king. The prince replies that calling it a criminal's curse is accurate and warns that resistance could be fatal. The man, eyes filled with tears, admits it's not entirely wrong in his case but warns the prince not to get cocky. The man warns the prince he doesn't understand the weight of his actions. The prince calmly asserts that a curse of this level will be broken once his court mages gather. The man clenches his fists, accusing the prince that only the crimes he's committed remain. The prince calls him brother, but the man admits he can't trust him any other way. The man demands if the prince truly knows what he's talking about, accusing him of being full of himself for being chosen. He bitterly recalls that if he had obeyed, he wouldn't be alive now, no matter how much of an eyesore he was. The prince responds that he wonders about that and refuses to explain. He agrees to honor the contract, allowing the man to do whatever he wants with the spoils from the empire and funding for the frontier city. The man hesitates, preparing to object. The man suddenly shouts that he will never forgive the prince for cursing him and vows punishment once the empire is repelled. The prince shrugs off the threat, telling him not to worry and that he can rest easy about the war with the empire. The man, uneasy, acknowledges he should take this seriously. The prince declares with quiet confidence that he alone will save the kingdom. The man clenches his teeth, shocked and tense, while another man reacts with wide-eyed surprise. The prince's gaze sharpens as the tension thickens. The prince turns and strides away, his cape billowing, as the man's trembling fist clenches in frustration. The prince accuses him of being right to exile him to the frontier, revealing that the first king and previous wielder of Dainsleif was also involved in dark deeds. The prince coldly reveals that the first king founded the country by murdering his own brother. His face shadowed and unreadable, the man desperately calls after him, begging him to wait. Another man confronts the prince, demanding why he would do such a thing. The prince responds that he cannot trust words alone and questions if he can be blamed. He acknowledges that the son of General Garst worries about him and admits his father was involved in the exile. The prince walks away, leaving the plea to apologize to the king unheard. The man explains that his father's regret was only for the kingdom's future and that he holds no personal grudge. The other asks where he's going, reminding him the castle gate is that way. The man walks toward a large guarded door, questioning if it is the chamber of the Holy Sword. Guards recognize the man as the king's brother and mention Commander Garst's presence. A guard refuses to open the door without the king's permission. The man forcefully pushes past the guard. The guard cries out in pain as the man uses a dark power on him. Another guard pleads for him to stop, but the man ignores the warning and takes a key. The door opens, releasing dark smoke that fills the chamber. The man and his companion step inside, and he wonders if it has been since the succession ceremony that this place was last opened. Dark smoke curls through the chamber, filling the air with an ominous presence. The man stumbles, clutching his wrist as the cursed wind saps his strength. His companion warns that forcing entry will cause him to wither and die, but he presses onward, stepping deeper into the room. The man approaches a pedestal where the holy sword lies shrouded in smoke. He kneels reverently, recognizing the legendary blade, Dainsleif. The dark mist swirls around the sword, emphasizing its power and mystery. As he reaches out to grasp the sword, it suddenly glows with radiant light. The man smirks, teasing that the sword seems excited to see him again and promises not to let him grow bored any longer. His eyes gleam with anticipation. Holding the holy sword firmly, he declares it reclaimed. With renewed resolve, he vows to show everyone the path to supremacy. His expression fierce and determined as the sword gleams in his hand. Having reclaimed the holy sword, he returns to the mansion where his allies wait. He descends the grand staircase, gripping the sword's hilt with a determined expression. A maid greets him with a respectful bow, welcoming him back as master. He confirms he has the holy sword Dainsleif. She asks if he's curious about it, but denies any interest. Holding the sword, he wonders aloud what he should do with it. The maid reflects silently, then begins to explain that everything began with that sword. She reveals she was the youngest daughter of the 6 witches of ruin, who destroyed many nations 200 years ago alongside their mother and sisters. She recalls her past as a witch of darkness, believing that path was natural. For the first time, she learned what love was, but her impulses overshadowed it. She remembers the hero chosen by the miracle sword, their enmity, and how she fought for him, even betraying her own family. A shadowed figure declares that at last, his heart is satisfied. A desperate voice pleads, asking why this is happening, begging not to be left alone, and to stop. The tension rises as the figure's hand reaches out, while the other voice screams in anguish. The scene shifts to a chained woman standing naked against a stone wall. Her eyes hidden by her hair, chains bind her arms, and a book cover featuring 2 armored figures is shown, announcing Volume 1 is now on sale. The woman questions how much time has passed and admits she no longer understands anything. A rat scurries nearby as she remains chained, her expression weary and resigned. The sound of footsteps echoes through the empty, ruined chamber. She laments her loneliness and pain, calling out for help and noticing the rat again. Suddenly, the heavy door creaks open, and her eyes widen in surprise as the silence breaks. The young man clenches his fist in frustration, admitting he has finally lost control because of that monster. His gaze shifts to a chained woman, and he decides to hide out here for a while. Alone in the vast, cracked chamber, he cautiously surveys the area, gripping his sword tightly as unease creeps in. The chained woman remains suspended against the wall, her expression calm yet resigned, as dust and debris settle around her in the silent ruin. Suddenly, the woman moves, startling the young man who gasps in shock, questioning if she is a woman or a ghost. She urgently calls out for him to wait and not leave, her voice filled with desperation. The young man protests, refusing to stay in the chamber with a naked woman chained to the wall, pointing out the monster still lurking outside. The woman gleefully agrees to let him touch her breasts as a reward, but he awkwardly asks if he can just leave instead. She relents, allowing it just for a moment. The woman explains she was sealed here because of her kind, witches from 200 years ago. The young man recalls hearing stories about them and wonders why the hero, who supposedly fought alongside her, would imprison her. She reacts with shock to his bluntness, while he reasons that the hero's legendary holy sword might make anything possible. Memories flood the woman's mind. A man coldly telling her she will spend eternity in penance, denying any love for her and blaming her for destroying his home and killing his fiancée. She struggles with the pain but quickly masks it, telling the young man it's nothing and that she wants to hear his story instead. The young man admits his story isn't worth telling but reveals he was exiled by his brother because he was chosen by the holy sword. He reflects on feeling betrayed and broken but sees himself as similar to her. Introducing himself as Radol, he stands determined despite his struggles to survive. The young man calls out the woman's name, Radol Zane, causing her to break down in tears. He quickly asks if he said something wrong, but she insists it's nothing at all. He scolds her for being gloomy from being trapped and insists on taking her to town. Despite her concern about the seal, he dismisses it, determined to break free from the binding. He hands her a garment to wear and urges her to put it on. She quietly accepts, and he resolves to protect the person he now cares for, deciding to follow and live for her sake. With a confident smile, he reaches out his hand and declares they should go, certain that this meeting was fate and that he is meant for this path. The maid smiles gently, but the young man questions her expression. Surprised, she apologizes and insists she'll make him understand everything by serving him every night. He asks what's on the floor, confused by her sudden change. Standing over defeated intruders, the maid explains she disposed of them after they broke into the mansion. She reveals she was the target of their attack, as they planned to take her alive. The young man deduces she was a hostage, noting the attackers were fast despite his brother's curse not being analyzed yet. The maid protests being seen as frail, insisting she is a genuine, lovely maid. The young man admits he overlooked that, seeing her as just a frail girl from the outside. She asks if there's no reward for such an excellent maid, hinting at her value. He acknowledges her skills but worries about securing the mansion, realizing he can't rely on Frontier City people while on border duty. The young man steels himself, determined to achieve an overwhelming victory by targeting the enemy's holy sword wielder. Behind him, armored soldiers prepare as a serious female knight stands ready, signaling the next enemy to face. The royal capital of Zane stands before them as dawn breaks. One figure exits a carriage, while two others prepare to depart immediately. A sharp footstep echoes as one remarks on the harsh schedule, calling the other a slave driver. The man with light hair calmly insists that time is of the essence, emphasizing urgency. The armored man grips his sword firmly, and the maid beside him nods with a confident smile. The light-haired man declares their destination. Fortress Blaine, they prepare to move out without hesitation. At Fortress Blaine, armored soldiers spot a lone figure in panic, questioning how there could be only one enemy. A commanding voice orders them to surround the target and show the pride of the kingdom. The tension rises as the soldiers ready themselves for battle. The lone female knight unleashes a powerful attack, forcing the soldiers to stagger back in shock and pain. The enemy commander orders a retreat, urging his men to fall back as the knight stands resolute, dominating the battlefield alone. Inside Fortress Blaine's operations command room, officers urgently report massive casualties and insist on a counterattack to prevent morale from collapsing. General Garst listens silently as another commands endurance until Prince Rador arrives, believing their chance will come then. A lone armored figure, a holy sword wielder of the Empire, stands poised with sword in hand. His determined eyes reveal the weight of his role as he prepares for battle. At the front line, two officers of the Arsline Empire's Western Invasion Force observe the battlefield near Fortress Blaine. They acknowledge the fortress as a tough nut to crack and the kingdom's final stronghold, noting the enemy's persistence and desperation. The officers discuss the rapid progress of the invasion, surprised it has only been 2 months since the front opened. They recall the terror caused by the Holy Swords during the invasion 10 years ago, reflecting on how the current swift advance began when 3 wielders appeared in their empire simultaneously. A man in regal armor reflects on the king's decision to seize the moment and conquer the continent, emphasizing how a single holy sword wielder can change the course of a war. He names the imperial princess chosen by the lightning sword, Cleum Solaris, Princess Celia von Arsline, who saved them in the last battle. 2 armored soldiers discuss the princess's fighting style, comparing it to a magnificent lightning strike. They acknowledge her straightforward nature and inability to tolerate those with dark emotions. One soldier tries to console the other, who struggles with his feelings despite recognizing her qualities. Princess Celia returns from Fortress Blaine, declaring she is done with today's diversion and found it boring due to the lack of resistance. The soldiers react with surprise at her early return, exchanging uneasy glances. Celia confronts the soldiers for holding strategy meetings without her, insisting they wait until she is present. They explain that Colonel Safaris feels uncomfortable around her. So they had no choice. Celia admonishes the colonel, warning him he won't survive the battlefield with such an attitude. The colonel offers his deepest apologies, clearly chastened. The princess bluntly tells the colonel he's old enough to overcome his phobia or he'll never find a partner, encouraging him with a smile despite his fearful reaction. One soldier sighs, lamenting her bluntness, while another tries to steer the conversation back to the war, eager for the colonel's input. The princess happily greets the general, calling him Gramps, causing the colonel to stammer in surprise. The general laughs heartily, pleased by the princess's greeting, and the colonel explains that this is General Garkos Barzan, a legendary figure admired by all soldiers. The colonel admits he cried with joy when chosen as the general's adjutant. But the other soldier notes the general has become a doting old man over his granddaughter. The princess asks how they plan to attack the fortress she visited that day, and the general names their opponent. General Basil Garst, the kingdom's guardian deity. The colonel warns the princess that the enemy has plenty of weapons and supplies, making the battle complicated. The princess questions if the enemy general is really that amazing, recalling how they did nothing during her visit, so she underestimated them. The colonel advises her to see the bigger picture and scolds her gently. She retorts that the enemy general must be better than him, calling him mean, while he grumbles in response. The general loudly declares he's clearly superior and won't lose to a brat 20 years his junior, making the princess beam proudly. The colonel explains that the guardian deity has blocked the empire's path for years, so this battle won't end easily. The princess contemplates this, her expression thoughtful as she prepares to consider her next move. The princess boldly asks if she should go fetch the enemy general's head herself, confident she could end the war by taking him out alone. The colonel slams his fist down, firmly forbidding such reckless action. As she cheerfully charges off again, the colonel and another soldier panic, fearing for her safety. The princess calls out to her grandfather, who reassures her but is visibly worried. He pleads for her to promise not to fight so recklessly anymore, reminding her of her earlier vow, leaving her flustered and uneasy. The grandfather addresses the princess with deep respect, praising her recent battle performance but warns that if she does everything herself, the officers will have no purpose. She listens, slightly overwhelmed but attentive. A soldier reminds her that many aim for promotions and asks her to leave some glory to them. The princess, blushing, agrees reluctantly. The colonel encourages her, praising her care for her subjects as the mark of a true leader, while the grandfather affectionately pats her head, causing her to complain about his nagging. A soldier, sweating nervously, tries to explain something with a hesitant gesture. Nearby, a man with a thick mustache and a woman exchange a relieved glance. The prince's expression sharpens suddenly, sensing something serious. Outside, a horse-drawn carriage waits under a cloudy sky, signaling an important departure or arrival. The prince grips his sword, Dane's Leaf, which begins to emit dark, ominous energy. A companion asks if something is wrong, and the prince admits concern. He reflects that the opposing side is finally escalating the conflict, signaling a turning point in the battle. The prince senses the enemy has escalated their efforts, gripping his sword as dark energy swirls around it. He asks what this means, and the armored man confirms the Empire might have sensed something too, signaling a serious shift in the conflict. The armored man insists they can no longer afford to waste time and orders Darren to provide a situation report. The prince listens intently, acknowledging the urgency. A strategic map reveals the kingdom's 10,000 troops facing 50,000 Imperial soldiers, with 20,000 enemy forces suppressing nearby territories. The remaining 30,000 Imperial soldiers are surrounding Fort Blaine, a worse situation than expected. The prince questions why his brother won't take the field. Despite the king's presence boosting morale, a maid suggests the prince might be too paralyzed by fear to decide. The prince worries that if Fort Blaine falls, the capital is lost, and deploying the royal guard would strengthen their forces. The prince reflects that the king is no coward but is terrified of the holy sword. When Fort Blaine was first besieged, the king wanted to lead the front lines himself, but upon reports of a holy sword wielder among the enemy, he locked himself away in the palace. The prince struggles with this reality as two advisors stand before the palace doors. The prince admits he doesn't understand politics but wonders if all kings are like this. He explains the king is haunted by the shadow of the holy sword, fearing and resenting its wielders because he was never chosen by it himself. The king abandoned his own brother for this reason, consumed by twisted animosity. The prince bitterly reflects on how the king cast him aside under the guise of protecting the kingdom, yet remains paralyzed despite the realm's dire state. The maid quietly listens as he struggles with this bitter irony. The prince then awkwardly asks if the maid is wearing her usual maid outfit again, questioning if she really intends to go to the battlefield dressed like that. The maid proudly declares that an apron dress is a maid's combat gear. Striking a confident pose, she imagines herself fluttering across the battlefield, elegantly striking down enemies. Then, she reveals her other side, gracefully waiting in bed for her master. The prince protests, telling her to cut it out, clearly flustered. The maid insists the outfit has two faces, day and night, and tells the prince not to take her seriously. The scene shifts outside where a guarded carriage is ready to depart, surrounded by armored soldiers, signaling the start of a journey or mission. 6 days after leaving the royal capital, the prince points decisively ahead from the guarded carriage, flanked by his maid and a companion. The camp bustles with armored soldiers preparing and resting by tents, the atmosphere tense but routine. A soldier approaches the prince's tent and apologizes for the intrusion, nervously bringing urgent news. The prince, caught off guard while in an intimate moment with the maid, quickly apologizes and composes himself. The prince asks for a moment to gather himself, gently waking the maid, Nymeria, who is still half asleep and clinging to him. His expression darkens as he processes the interruption, clearly frustrated by the timing. The prince and his companion discuss the news over mugs of drink. The soldier reports that monsters have been appearing on the road ahead, which the prince finds unsurprising but notes that the frontier where he grew up was unique in rarely seeing monsters near settlements or main roads. The report continues with the revelation that the monster terrorizing the road is a lesser dragon. The prince explains that dragons are imagined as ultimate monsters, far beyond the lesser monsters that roam in packs. He notes that these dragons possess enough power to easily wipe out towns and cities. The prince reflects on the danger, stating even a lesser dragon is a perilous threat. He has helped other adventurers defeat them before but insists they don't have time to wait for that now. He considers bypassing the main road to reach Fort Blaine but dismisses the idea, saying detouring is too much hassle. The companion confidently declares that if a monster blocks their path, they will simply kill it and move on. The prince worries about exhausting themselves, emphasizing their goal to strictly defend Fort Blaine. The companion reassures him that if that's the only concern, then it's not a problem. The companion asserts he will be the only one fighting, gripping his large sword tightly. He adds that it will be just him and Dainsleif facing the threat. The young knight protests vehemently, shocked that his charge would fight alone, insisting that as his guard, he cannot allow it. The prince calmly tells him not to get so worked up, reminding him that he is only his guard because the prince's brother ordered it, so there's no need for such formality. The knight argues that even far from the capital, the prince remains of royal blood and deserves respect. The prince acknowledges the knight's idealism but says he is misunderstanding something important. The knight, now serious, declares his desire to see how far he can go wielding only his sword, wanting to test his blade's limits. The scene shifts to a carriage and riders moving along a road. The group arrives at a location where a foul stench fills the air. One knight comments on the dreadful smell, wondering if it is the monster's influence. The prince reacts sharply to the warning call of Sir Knight, as they proceed cautiously. A desperate man runs down a ruined road, crying out for help and warning that something is coming. The prince questions why civilians are on a road that should be closed, while his companion wonders if they are stragglers. Both sense something is wrong. Suddenly, a massive force crashes down nearby, and the man screams for the knight as his arm begins to petrify. The prince reacts in shock, recognizing the danger. A colossal basilisk emerges, its claws crashing to the ground. The creature prepares to unleash its petrification breath, looming ominously over the terrified man. The man recalls hearing it was a subdragon, but now the worst possible monster has appeared. The basilisk lunges forward, shattering the ground beneath it as the man faces imminent peril. The prince grimly acknowledges the horror of the situation as a monstrous creature claws at the ground nearby. He admits this is a serious problem, while a maid offers to assist him with a hopeful smile. The prince firmly declines her offer, instructing her to watch from a safe distance. A companion respectfully addresses him as Your Highness. But the prince insists he will intervene if anything happens, regardless of the consequences. The companion falls silent, and the prince tells him to do as he wishes. The prince faces the dragon-like beast with a confident smile, gripping his sword tightly. The creature reacts with surprise, sensing the challenge. The dragon roars fiercely and lunges forward with claws extended. But the prince calmly advances to meet the attack head-on. The prince lunges forward, swinging his sword to strike the basilisk's claw as it slashes toward him. He braces himself, gripping the sword tightly, eyes sharp and focused. His blade pierces deep into the basilisk's neck, black blood spurting as the beast roars in agony. The prince stands firm, unwavering against the monstrous creature's furious retaliation. A calm smile crosses his face as he praises the holy sword's power, acknowledging its strength. The basilisk glares with fierce eyes, wounded but still defiant, towering over him. The prince clenches his fist, calling the creature stubborn. Facing the battered basilisk, the prince declares it's time to end the battle. The wounded beast watches him silently, smoke rising from the ruined surroundings as tension builds toward the final confrontation. The dragon lunges fiercely, claws outstretched, but the prince taunts it, mocking its cowardice. He warns the beast against running away like a coward. The dragon snarls, closing in, while another voice urgently calls out Darren's name, fearing he will be caught in a deadly crossfire. The prince steels himself, gripping his sword tightly as debris flies around him. Though he feels no obligation to save his brother's subordinate, he admits it would leave a bitter taste if he lets him die. Determined, he prepares to intervene. The dragon and prince lock eyes, tension crackling. The prince commands the beast not to look away, reminding it that he is the opponent, both ready for the next move. The battle hangs on a knife's edge. The prince faces the basilisk, declaring himself the opponent and warning the creature to remember that the overwhelming power of the holy sword casts darkness over the battlefield. A sharp, determined gaze crosses the prince's face as he mutters a curse, calling the beast a damned lizard. The basilisk roars fiercely, its jaws wide and terrifying as it lunges forward with claws extended. The prince braces himself, ready to meet the attack head-on as the beast's rage intensifies. A voice urgently shouts for the prince to stop, warning that the basilisk's petrifying breath is deadly. The prince remains focused, invoking the holy sword by name, calling upon its ancient power to counter the monster's curse. The prince raises the massive holy sword high, shouting for its legendary power to reveal itself now. The basilisk unleashes a torrent of petrifying breath, but the prince stands firm, eyes blazing with resolve as he prepares to unleash the sword's true might. The cursed sword fighting technique, Hatchet of Hrungnir, is unleashed as the prince stands firm, his sword glowing darkly. The basilisk snarls fiercely, its jaws wide, ready to strike. The basilisk roars, its body surrounded by dark energy as it lunges forward. The prince smirks confidently, eyes sharp and unyielding. The prince faces the basilisk alone, the dark aura swirling around him. Two onlookers watch anxiously from behind. One asks in disbelief what kind of power this is, while the prince remains composed, gripping his sword tightly. The prince acknowledges the power's effectiveness, noting it's better than expected. He confirms his safety to a worried companion, who expresses relief. The armored knight praises the prince's skill, amazed that a basilisk was defeated so easily. The prince asks if everyone else is okay, while the companion looks on, still catching their breath. The basilisk roars fiercely, its jaws snapping with dark energy crackling around it. The prince explains that Dainsleif is a holy sword that rules over curses, capable of corrupting those slashed by the miasma. He adds that the sword can also turn those slashed into stone, revealing the basilisk's petrifying power. The prince taunts the basilisk, accusing it of turning countless people to stone just to devour them, and now it will taste the same fate. He announces the hindrances are eliminated and urges haste to Blaine Fortress, mentioning he has finished test cutting the blade. The companion, still catching his breath, questions if the prince wasn't at full strength during the earlier fight. The prince dismisses the concern, saying if he gave his all here, the companion would be involved. He admits the real challenge is still far off. 10 days later, he reflects on the war with the Empire, noting the enemy is not just a knight but an Excalibur holder. He looks forward to seeing this opponent's full strength. The group finally arrives at Blaine Fortress, a sturdy stronghold nestled in the mountains. The prince thanks his companions for their hard work on the long journey, signaling the start of the next phase of their mission. The prince listens as Nymeria, overwhelmed, protests that connecting with him in a new way was deeply fulfilling despite her outburst. He contemplates the fortress before them, noting it as the kingdom's key point. A companion explains Fort Blaine lies in a valley surrounded by hills, unusually low for a military base. The companion elaborates that Fort Blaine's location is strategic, taking advantage of its terrain. Attacking from higher ground would cause too much momentum, hindering cavalry mobility downhill. Rainwater collects around the fortress, turning the area muddy and difficult for infantry to traverse. If enemies surround the fortress, defenders can counterattack from behind. The prince surveys the fortress walls, questioning if supplies will last 2 months into the war. He steels himself, gripping his sword tightly as he prepares for the coming conflict. An armored general appears, greeting the prince and his party, inviting them inside. The prince acknowledges the welcome, ready to proceed deeper into the fortress. The prince is stunned, unable to believe he is being greeted personally. He acknowledges the man before him as General Bazar Garst, noting it has been a long time since their last meeting. The atmosphere grows tense as the reunion unfolds. The general compliments the prince, Raydorl, on his impressive appearance, calling him a superb warrior. The prince remains silent, sweat forming as the weight of the moment settles. The prince remarks that the general seems a little old now, suggesting perhaps it is time for change. The general responds that he will consider it if he survives the war. He urges them not to waste time and commands them to follow him. They enter a room filled with books and a large table displaying a map. The general invites them to sit and expresses his sincere gratitude for their support on the frontier. The prince responds with a simple acknowledgement, ready to proceed. The prince lounges with his legs on the table, declaring he plans to squeeze a hefty reward from his brother for their efforts. A maid nervously asks who the woman behind him is. The general clears his throat, saying he wants to immediately explain the situation first. The prince dismisses concerns about the maid, insisting she's just a servant and not to worry over such a trifle. The maid reacts with surprise. While the general and another man exchange uneasy glances, the maid anxiously prepares to speak about the war situation. The general reports that the Imperial Army began advancing into Fortress Blaine half a month after capturing Fortress Balmes. He notes daily skirmishes continue without major complications. The prince questions the slow progress, suspecting the enemy has another intention. The general suggests the Imperial Army might be waging a war of attrition to minimize troop exhaustion. The prince reflects that a war of attrition only prolongs the conflict and leads to losing supplies, especially with winter approaching and heavy snow expected. He warns the strategy risks cutting off supply routes. The general admits the prince's reasoning is sound but insists the circumstances are different this time because Fortress Balmes is now in the Empire's hands. The prince questions if the eastern part of the kingdom is being occupied, with Fort Balmes as the enemy's base. He worries that if winter cuts off supply routes, the enemy will plunder the area without hesitation. The older general grimly agrees, warning that the eastern kingdom will become a hellscape when winter arrives. The general explains he was ordered to meet the prince to prevent such devastation. He acknowledges the prince's anger but insists there is no other choice but to rely on the prince's strength. Bowing deeply, the general implores the prince to lend his assistance for the sake of the kingdom and its people. The prince listens silently, facing a large strategic map. The prince reflects quietly on his strained relationship with his father, wondering if things could have been different had they communicated better. A maid timidly calls him master, breaking the heavy silence as she gently places a hand on his shoulder. Darren commands General Garst to raise his head, his voice firm and resolute. A maid stands quietly behind him, while Garst listens with a serious expression. The general acknowledges Darren's sincerity and offers to grant him one wish in return, but warns there is a condition attached. He reveals he does not want Garst to become his enemy after the war with the Empire. He insists that despite his contract with his brother, he will fight the Empire even if Garst rejects the terms. Darren promises that if Garst accepts, he will secure victory with minimal damage. He solemnly swears on his holy sword, emphasizing the gravity of his words. The general remains silent, contemplating. He wonders why those serving the same kingdom impose such conditions and notes Darren's striking resemblance to the king. The general reflects that Darren is a warrior who serves the kingdom. Darren listens intently, acknowledging this truth. The general warns that if the country they serve were to disappear, loyalty would vanish as well. He admits that if Darren truly aims to bring salvation to their land, the path ahead will be difficult. The older general declares he will swear the same loyalty to Darren that he once swore to His Majesty granted. Darren solemnly vows to bring victory to the kingdom's army, invoking the name of Raydorl Zane as he clenches his fist. Darren stands resolute, promising they will never fall behind the Imperial Excalibur holders. The sword lies on the table as a door creaks open, revealing a quiet room where Nymeria rests beside Darren. A heavily armored man enters, apologizing for the late hour. Darren and Nymeria acknowledge him as General Garst. The general asks if he is still needed, and Darren confirms this is related to their previous conversation. The general announces that tomorrow they will go on the offense. Darren questions the general about being holed up in the fort and what caused this change. The general explains they had only been able to set up a resistance until now. Darren admits relying on one individual's strength is folly but acknowledges he has joined their ranks. The general solemnly states they have no choice but to stake everything on Darren, warning that if they delay, the kingdom will rot and crumble from within. The armored man reveals his certainty that some within the royal court are colluding with the Empire, prolonging the war for their own gain. Darren questions why this is being told now, concerned about the safety even within their own walls. The general explains many people come and go during the day, implying the threat is close. Darren grasps the gravity, realizing the Empire's willingness to fight a long war stems from this internal betrayal. Darren contemplates the dire consequences if the schemers succeed. Even if they hold the fortress to the last man, the kingdom will collapse. He understands that the purpose of Dainsleif is to prevent this fate by securing a swift, decisive victory. With resolve, he asks what he must do next. The general requests Darren to stand by until the appointed time. As the moment of conflict nears, Darren flashes a defiant smile, gripping his sword firmly. The general prays that Darren wields the sword without hesitation, ready to face the imminent battle. The night deepens as the war looms just ahead. Darren stands firm atop the fortress wall. His sword planted beside him, below, rows of armored soldiers stand ready, their spears raised in silent formation. He glances back once, steeling himself for the battle to come. Inside a dimly lit room, Darren confesses he preferred fighting outside, but acknowledges the limits of their current strategy. The older general beside him reveals the identity of Darren's opponent. Celia von Arsline, the princess of the Arsline Empire and wielder of Clausulas, the sacred sword of lightning. Darren questions if the Empire's holy sword wielder is truly a woman. The general warns not to underestimate her, explaining that because of her, the kingdom's army has been pushed to the brink. Darren smirks, challenging the general's concern. While the armored man insists Celia is a true hero, Darren declares it's just him and his sword now, ready to teach the Empire a lesson. He reminds himself that a hero never fights alone. As he looks out over the fortress walls, a voice calls him, "Your Highness Radorl." The general announces it's time to begin the war. Darren's expression hardens with resolve. The moment has finally arrived. The castle gate swings open, startling the soldiers inside. One commands General Bazin, who responds with urgency. A knight questions if the enemy plans a direct field battle despite their numerical disadvantage. A noblewoman in armor, clutching a sword, declares the fortress's defense was a lie, addressing her as Your Highness. The soldiers debate the situation, noting the strange change in atmosphere and the absence of the usual resignation. They recall reinforcements arriving last night, only about 100, and wonder if these new arrivals are the key to the shift. Shock hits one soldier as he realizes King Granite Zane himself is inside the fortress. The commanding officer orders Safaris to lead the assault, instructing generals to prepare for a crushing attack on the kingdom's army. He acknowledges the morale boost from the reinforcements and stresses the need to strike before the tide of battle changes. A young female knight eagerly offers to prepare as well. The commander advises patience until the enemy reveals their trump card, assuring Safaris his turn will come. The young knight laments the wait but understands the sacred sword's true purpose. The noblewoman grips Clausulas, sensing its restless energy, as the commander bids farewell, counting on her. A lone figure surveys the battlefield from above, questioning what is happening down below. Suddenly, a formation of armored soldiers stands ready, their shields raised and spears poised. A voice calls out to Captain Darren, announcing the formation's readiness. Mounted knights charge forward with a fierce battle cry. While the infantry prepares to engage, the command rings out to keep their guard up and push the spearmen forward to confront the enemy. The clash begins as soldiers collide with a forceful impact. One soldier cries out in pain, but the commander insists that no matter the enemy's strength, the Imperial soldiers will not be defeated. He explains this is the art of war. The spear wall. Archers on the fortress walls ready their bows as enemy cavalry approaches rapidly. A soldier alerts General Garst to the Imperial soldiers attacking from the side, which he expected. The archers release their arrows just as the cavalry reacts with surprise to the incoming assault. Arrows rain down on charging knights, causing them to cry out in pain. A soldier nearby curses the overwhelming presence of a kingdom's atmosphere. Another armored soldier acknowledges the situation with grim realization, while a man in a cloak closes his eyes, bracing himself. Standing amidst the battlefield's aftermath, the cloaked man reflects on their initial victory, but warns that the difference in military strength means they cannot relax. He urges vigilance, declaring the battle truly begins now as smoke rises from a distant hill. The scene shifts to two armored men discussing the conflict. One praises the fight so far but admits his opponent is the fierce General Gracchus Barzin. The other warns that if their defenses break, this desperate measure is all they can take. The armored man reacts with tension as the other asks what's wrong. The older general comments bitterly that the enemy has already found a workaround. Calling someone a dirty old man, soldiers rally, shouting battle cries as they face the approaching enemy. A soldier urgently alerts their commander that the enemy is near. The commander acknowledges the news, eyes wide with shock as he realizes the Imperial army is dangerously close. Just when it seemed the enemy had abandoned their cavalry charge on the castle gates, they instead used their numerical advantage to encircle a wide area of the battlefield. The distance between the forces steadily shrinks as armored soldiers clash swords and shields. Arrows suddenly rain down, and a commander urgently warns to raise shields overhead as arrows fly toward them. The commander grimly notes the simultaneous sweep of enemy archers, realizing the attackers aim to wipe out their local advantage. Despite the spearman's protection, he knows this assault is different and far more dangerous. Spotting a weakness in the left wing's defense, the commander shouts orders to reinforce it, emphasizing how crucial numbers are if conditions remain unchanged. He charges forward, shouting a fierce battle cry, cutting down an enemy soldier with his sword. Suddenly, the commander is struck by an enemy's blade, his allies shouting in alarm. He grimaces in pain, clutching his wound as he struggles to stay on his feet, cursing the situation as the battle intensifies around him. A soldier is struck violently, crying out in pain as another urgently asks if he's okay. The tension rises as the injured man struggles to stay upright. The commander's face tightens with grim determination, knowing defeat is inevitable if this continues, but he insists they must hold their ground until ordered to retreat. Suddenly, the commander notices something unexpected and focuses intently. He recalls how the enemy abandoned their defense to go on the offensive, suspecting a hidden plan behind this risky move. Nearby, a seasoned general questions the royal army's strategy, noting that after the enemy broke through the first line, they simply defended without any clear plan. He wonders if there's another objective, doubting the reckless nature of General Basilgarst, who wouldn't make such a careless gamble. A messenger urgently reports that the royal army has begun retreating. The general, unfazed, commands his troops to attack the fortress immediately and warns them not to let the enemy get close. Though the plan seems simple, he admits he's determined not to miss the chance to win. A seasoned soldier remarks that this is what a battlefield truly looks like. The young princess, armored and determined, responds that she is not ready yet. Her gaze sharpens as she senses something approaching. Gripping the hilt of her sacred sword tightly, she warns that something is coming. Amid the fortress walls, soldiers shout orders to retreat, urging each other to keep pushing the enemy back. One commander insists he will stay in the rear and urges everyone to hurry. The soldiers brace themselves, shouting that they won't let the enemy pass. The commander fights fiercely, frustrated by being outnumbered. He struggles to fend off multiple armored foes, shouting commands to attack now. Despite his efforts, he is overwhelmed and exclaims his frustration as the enemy closes in. The battle intensifies as the commander is struck down by a sudden attack. The enemy soldiers close in, but a voice praises Darren for his efforts. The commander's eyes widen in surprise, acknowledging the unexpected support. A commanding figure steps forward, declaring he has been waiting. The armored warrior smirks confidently, announcing the power of Dainsleif revealing its fangs. He challenges his opponent, saying he'll let him go wild for a while, gripping his sword with determination. A confident warrior praises Darren, acknowledging his efforts despite arriving late. The battlefield is littered with fallen soldiers as armored troops stand ready. Tension thick in the air. Armored soldiers urge each other to attack, mocking the fear of facing only one opponent. The warrior charges forward with a powerful swing of his sword, breaking through the enemy line. The enemy soldiers are stunned as their bodies and weapons suddenly become immaterial, leaving them defenseless. One soldier panics, realizing his sword and body are no longer tangible. The warrior stands firm, advancing as the enemy collapses in confusion and fear. The Imperial Army holds position, with a soldier questioning General Basilgarst if their current strategy will lead to victory. A woman in armor listens silently, while the soldier doubts the plan despite trusting the princess's words, wondering if the battle will truly end without incident. Soldiers urgently leave the fortress as a man shouts to General Barzan, alarmed by the fortress's strange state. The general panics, desperate and confused, asking what to do when he's just one step away. Meanwhile, a lone armored warrior charges forward, swinging his sword with overwhelming force, scattering the soldiers in his path. The warrior stands amidst fallen foes, an eerie aura surrounding him. A soldier questions if this is magic, but the warrior remains silent. The soldier, sweating and fearful, calls the warrior a high-ranking magician. But the warrior's intense gaze shows something else. The soldier defiantly tells his grandfather he's wrong. The warrior's face darkens, eyes glowing with fierce energy as he declares this is different. A woman in armor, likely a princess, asks if it's magic. The soldier nervously asks about her highness, but the warrior insists it is not magic. He grips his sword tightly, the atmosphere charged with power. The warrior strikes down enemies with a terrifying force described as inhuman energy. The soldier screams in agony as the warrior's sword glows with a radiant light. The warrior reveals the sword's name, saying it is the same as Clayam Salas, the sacred sword linked to the princess. The battlefield trembles under the weight of this overwhelming power. A woman clad in armor declares the sword is a holy sword, gripping its ornate hilt firmly. Nearby, a man with a fierce expression laughs wildly. his eyes sharp with intensity as he raises his own sword. Soldiers react with shock and fear, recognizing the sword as the holy sword of Zain Kingdom, a legendary weapon whose owner hasn't appeared for over 200 years. They accuse the wielder of being a monster, unable to believe his power, and shout for their comrades to stand their ground. One armored soldier calls out urgently to the lone opponent, demanding a fight. The man with the holy sword laughs maniacally, his blade raised high as jet-black energy surges across the battlefield. A soldier watches in horror, realizing the sword is cursed, a sinister holy sword of evil. The overwhelming dark power swallows the battlefield, filling the air with dread. The tables have turned as the lone armored warrior stands tall, his sword glowing with fierce energy, while soldiers around him stagger and fall, overwhelmed by his power. A woman in armor watches solemnly, her gaze fixed on the warrior. The warrior laughs darkly, recalling the surge of power surpassing even the time he used the basilisk Dane slave. He smiles confidently, declaring he can go even higher. The warrior taunts the scattered soldiers, demanding to know what's wrong with them. He mocks their belief that sheer numbers could win, revealing his knowledge that the Imperial army is just a bunch of random bums. The armored soldiers rally, urged not to underestimate the Empire, and charge forward with swords raised. The warrior remains unfazed, questioning the loss of their numerical advantage and vowing to crush the difference in numbers by trampling the advantage of the land. The warrior taunts the battlefield, challenging anyone who can stop him to come forward. He mocks their courage, questioning if only his words hold power as he violently sends armored soldiers flying with a single strike. He orders the remaining soldiers to hide and not engage, commanding them to act only when he gives the signal. Two soldiers scramble to obey, while the warrior stands poised, ready to strike again. The warrior slashes through the enemy ranks effortlessly, his blade cutting down foes as he declares the rabble unworthy and their resistance a waste of time. A soldier in a helmet breathes a sigh of relief, thanking everyone for their efforts. Suddenly, a massive impact erupts nearby, shaking the ground violently. A soldier cries out in shock, identifying the force as a devil, as dark energy streaks through the sky toward the battlefield. Inside the walls of the royal fortress, soldiers stagger in awe at the overwhelming power of the holy sword. One gasps, recognizing it as the true might of the Empire if wielded by His Highness. Despite the devastation, the leader urges those still able to move to follow him, insisting there is still work to be done. Outside, a violent shockwave tears through the air, debris flying as dark energy swirls wildly. The armored warrior stands firm, gripping his sword tightly as he prepares to test its power. He questions whether this power alone can annihilate the world of granite, but knows he needs more strength, calling upon a cursed sword fighting technique. He demands greater power from his weapon, the Dane slave. Raising the sword high, he shouts the technique's name, Jormungandr, unleashing a massive surge of overwhelming energy that crackles and roars around him, signaling his relentless hunger for absolute power. The armored warrior raises his sword high, dark energy crackling violently around him as the ground trembles beneath his feet. Shadows and power surge outward, signaling the unleashing of a devastating force. He shouts the name of his cursed technique, Jormungandr, demanding overwhelming power as the sword radiates an intense, roaring energy. His expression hardens with relentless hunger for absolute strength, the air thick with the surge of his unleashed might. The warrior commands his cursed sword, Dane slave, to unleash its power. He shouts the name of his technique, Jormungandr, as a massive holy sword strike tears through the battlefield with overwhelming force. The destructive energy surges forward, its curse far from spent, as armored soldiers watch in stunned silence. The sheer scale of the power leaves no doubt that the curse's depths have yet to be fully revealed. The devastating strike hurls soldiers through the air, shattering their defenses and scattering them like ragdolls. The impact carves a wide path of destruction, sending debris flying and leaving the battlefield in chaos. A soldier glares upward in frustration as the dark, monstrous energy looms above him. The warrior clenches his teeth, cursing the situation, as the overwhelming force descends with relentless intent. The warrior shouts a fierce command to protect everyone, invoking the power of Clam Salas as a massive burst of energy erupts forward. His determined gaze sharpens, signaling the unleashing of a powerful attack. The warrior smirks confidently, mocking his opponent by asking if they take him for an idiot. He acknowledges the presence of someone still needing a lesson, his stance firm as he faces a distant figure standing atop a cliff. The focus shifts to the figure on the cliff, revealed as the Empire's holy sword user, Celia von Arsline. Lightning crackles around her as she grips her sacred sword, her expression resolute and commanding. Celia commands her grandfather to run away, her voice calm but urgent. The warrior watches her with a knowing smile, while a heavily armored soldier calls out to her with concern, emphasizing the gravity of the moment. The battlefield lies in chaos as soldiers are thrown aside, clearly overwhelmed. A sharp voice accuses the warrior of making a mess of everyone, but he counters fiercely, declaring that this is all his opponent can do to stay ahead. With a confident grin, he announces that from now on, he will be the one to challenge him, urging him to cheer up. The warrior launches into a powerful attack, shouting the name of his cursed sword fighting technique. Scorpion. He leaps toward his opponent, who braces for impact. The opposing fighter shouts a counter technique, the imperial-style government technique. Furgo, as the warrior suddenly vanishes from sight. Both warriors lock eyes with fierce determination, each declaring that anyone who stands in the way of their empire or supremacy will be defeated by them. Their swords clash with explosive force, signaling the intense battle between these two formidable adversaries. The battle escalates as the two Excalibur wielders face off, teleportation adding unpredictable twists. One smirks, hinting at strange powers, while the other angrily demands respect for Clam Salas. The clash intensifies with a holy sword spreading a dark curse, shocking both combatants. They charge at each other with fierce determination, the cursed energy swirling ominously around the princess as she braces for impact. The opposing warrior finds the curse outrageous, but she insists she was only trying to bring beauty to a grim battlefield. She shouts the name of her technique, Tonitrus, unleashing a powerful strike filled with radiant energy. The other swordsman narrowly dodges, eyes wide with alarm as the attack surges toward him. The princess questions why a worthy holy sword wielder would use such destructive power, accusing him of causing countless deaths. He retorts sharply, blaming the invading nerd empire for the bloodshed, gripping his sword tightly as the confrontation grows more intense. The clash intensifies as one demands if starting a war for revenge makes him a victim, but the other vehemently denies it. She insists the empire fights to unify the continent and create a peaceful world where everyone can live happily and healthily. Her sword strikes forward with fierce conviction, questioning how he cannot understand such a goal. The armored warrior scoffs, calling the king feverish for such ideals. He challenges the notion of peace and happiness, pointing to the countless people trampled to reach this point. He questions if those sacrifices are truly willing, revealing the harsh reality behind the empire's holy sword users. The princess reacts with shock and realization. The armored man lashes out, accusing her of childish naivety and ignorance of the holy sword's severity. He mocks her as just a kid, dismissing her ideals as a bedtime story that excludes adults. She retorts fiercely, reminding him they are the same age and that he is talking about awesome. The princess charges again, shouting not to be mocked as she unleashes her technique, Tonitrus, while the armored man counters with Scorpion. Their blades clash amid a fierce exchange, but her attack is drowned out by his overwhelming power, leaving him frustrated yet determined. The princess launches a lightning-fast attack, shouting lightning. As she strikes down toward her opponent, he narrowly blocks, shouting back, "I got you. Sorry." As the clash sends shards of energy flying, the armored man counters with a brutal punch, forcing her to dodge. He mocks her, noting how her beautiful sword is easy to spot. Calling his opponent barbaric, she reacts with shock and determination. He taunts, wondering who benefits from the sword's power, calling out, "Brother." As he braces himself, his eyes narrow, frustrated by the princess's swift movements, and he vows to trap her, making it impossible to move freely. The man summons a dark aura, declaring the cursed sword fighting technique, Medusa. He challenges which technique is superior, gripping his sword tightly as the ominous power radiates around him. The armored figure tightens their grip on the sword, dark energy crackling fiercely around them as they prepare to strike. The tension surges as the wielder declares the dark sword's technique dominates the battlefield, eyes blazing with determination. Sweat beads on their face as they shout a challenge to settle things here and now, ready to unleash their overwhelming power.